Briefly about honeybees and the alleged disappearance of honeybees. Okay, so this is about how humans are anxious little creatures. Tide pods, Nazis, and bees, the top 10 moral panics of the 2010s. What's this? Okay, that's not important. So, human beings are anxious creatures, blah, 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 blockbuster bloodbaths. This is not interesting to me. Oral panics, various toys and cleaning products children could swallow. Obviously, read this on your own if you wish. Bees. For a few years in the early part of the decade, things looked dire for the humble honeybee and all the agricultural products that depended on it for pollination. A rise in the number of beehives mysteriously dying off, a phenomenon known as colony collapse disorder, sparked a series of apocalyptic headlines. Publications warned of a honeybee apocalypse or a bee-mageddon. National Public Radio worried we were reaching a crisis point for crops. Time devoted a cover story to the world without bees. The Obama administration threw $83 million at the problem. From our vantage point, think about that, $83 million at the problem. We don't have enough money for socialized medicine. Okay. From our vantage point at the end of the decade, this all looks overblown. As Shaw Reagan noted in a 2017 issue of Reason, the actual number of honeybee colonies continued to grow. Keep that in mind. The actual number of honeybee colonies continued to grow, despite the increased bee mortality rate. Commercial honeybees, he wrote, have addressed the increasing mortality rates by rapidly rebuilding their hives, and they have done so with virtually no economic effects passed on to consumers, meaning the bees aren't charging you for their hard work. The picture looks pretty similar today. One study published this past July found that colony collapse disorder has not had measurable effects on honey production, input prices, or even numbers of bee colonies. Makes you wonder what all the buzz was about. Okay, so I'm going to move on to another article about beepocalypse. So this is from the Genetic Literacy Project. As a transhumanist, I'm a big believer and supporter of genetic modification, genetically modified organisms, CRISPR, all sorts of good stuff, genetic medicine I'm a very big supporter of. But let's see what we got going on here. So in reality, the Western honeybee, aka the European honeybee, which does much of the heavy lifting in regard to crop pollination, meaning it's not really indigenous to the Americas or Asia, it was introduced. Okay, though there is evidence that some wild bee populations are declining, keep in mind that there are about 20,000 bee species, only a fraction of which contribute to meaningful crop pollination. In other words, commonly found bees do most of the pollination, while endangered bee species aren't contributing much to agriculture. If they went extinct, it would be sad and perhaps preventable, loss in biodiversity, but hardly an ecological catastrophe. Besides, even if the very worst were to come true and all bees vanished overnight, a scenario so outlandish as to be laughable, society would not face an insurmountable problem. The Genetic Literacy Project explains that bees are responsible for about 7% of our food supply. That's a substantial portion. However, a bee extinction would not trigger civilizational collapse. Okay, keep that in mind. The beepocalypse myth. Colony collapse disorder is a very real thing. It's like an autoimmune disorder immune disorder that bees develop, and it's not very good. Just keep in mind, I'm not an entomologist. However, the honeybee population did face what appeared to be a crisis in the mid-2000s. It appeared to be a crisis, but the bees, as you remember from an earlier article, the bees made up for it by reproducing quicker and rebuilding their colonies faster. That's what bees do. Okay, so began discovering that their honeybees had mysteriously abandoned many of their colonies, leaving behind the queen bee, attended by too few immature worker bees to sustain the colony. Yet with ample viable brood and stored food, the first report classified as colony collapse disorder was in mid-November 2006 by a Pennsylvania beekeeper overwintering in Florida. By February 2007, large commercial migratory beekeepers wintering in California, Florida, Oklahoma, and Texas had reported heavy losses associated with colony collapse disorder, with losses ranging from 30% to 90% of their bee colonies. This phenomenon was dubbed colony collapse disorder. What made colony collapse disorder's appearance in the United States stunning and alarming was that episodes were being reported from widely separated states across the continent. At first, genetically modified crops and later neonicotinoid pesticides were fingered by environmental groups and some entomologists as the presumed causal agents. But when the bee colonies were examined, the colony collapse disorder diagnosis emerged. Scientists quickly dispensed of the GMO argument, as well as each GM crop is different, and there is no plausible explanation why a phenomenon noted in one region of the U.S. would not also show up in other regions or countries using similar modified crops. Did the use of pesticides or neonics in particular cause or contributed to colony collapse disorder in 2006? The scientific consensus now firmly says no. Colony collapse disorder is a historically common occurrence that predated the introduction of genetically modified crops and modern pesticides. Upon further investigation, colony collapse disorder was shown to be a centuries-old periodic phenomenon that by other names has occurred periodically for centuries in specific locales. Limited occurrences resembling colony collapse disorder were fully documented as early as 1869 and on the Isle of Wight in the UK in 2006, and also in other parts of Europe and in Egypt. There were reports of similar bee behavior in hives in the US in 1918 and 1919 and thereafter. It eventually became more widely known as disappearing disease. The focus of neonicotinoids as a contributing factor is more complicated. Neonics are a class of systemic pesticide introduced in the early 1990s and popular in the US, Australia, Europe, and elsewhere to protect corn, soy, cotton, and canola farmers. They have been embraced as a less toxic replacement for organophosphate pesticides, which can be either natural or synthetic, which are known to kill bees and wildlife and have been linked to health problems in workers applied to the soil, sprayed on the crop, or most commonly used as a seed treatment. Neonics are absorbed into the plant, which is ingested by insects, discouraging pests from wreaking havoc on the crops. The seed treatment lowers the amount of neonic used 10 to 20-fold, decreasing the need for open spraying of the plant, a genuine sustainability benefit. Keep that in mind, that's a genuine sustainability benefit. It's reducing the need for the use by 10 to 20-fold. Many in the media and activists critical of conventional agriculture often conflate bee health problems like colony collapse disorder with the health issues encountered by the wild honeybee population. From 1972 to 2006, serious reductions in hives were documented among feral honeybees, meaning bees that have escaped from hives and set up their own hives in the U.S., and recent studies, though fragmentary, appear to show scattered declines among wild honeybees. The precise causes of most recent colony collapse disorder incidents remains undetermined. Most likely, it's a combination of factors that affect honeybee colony health more generally, discussed below, are involved. Okay, are honeybees in decline? Said simply, honeybees are not on the verge of extinction or irreversible decline, and the world will not face mass starvation. That's a scare rhetoric, as the Washington Post reported in two separate features. Advocacy group claims amplified in thousands of stories but not all are wrong, but the direction of the media narrative, like the path of a 250,000-ton ocean liner, was established in the late 2000s and does not turn that around easily, particularly when it serves an ideological conclusion that conveniently helps in fundraising for those who promote it, despite claims to the contrary. In fact, honeybee populations aren't declining anywhere in the world, despite many media headlines. Okay, so I'm going to move on. This is showing that the world honeybees have gone up. You see, they keep going, they're trending up. Okay, and you can follow this article on your own if you'd like. So, what is environmental conservation? Environmental conservation refers to the practice of protecting the Earth's natural environment through organizations, governments, and personal actions by individuals. The study of environmental conservation is so important because it enlightens us as to what we need to do to conserve our planet and resources. As the years go on, the growth of the human population has degraded our ecosystems, not necessarily, and has depleted our natural resources. That's true, but it doesn't have to be true, okay? So, conservation, environmental conservation in America, conservation history in the future, National Geographic conservation, So, let's talk about environment and America and the conservation of the environment in America. Okay, we want places to jog and hike, etc. Environment America is working to protect our public lands from exploitation and development, save America's remaining wildlife, and defend our oceans from drilling, plastic pollution, and other threats. Save the bees, save the trees, yada yada. Conservation history in the future. What is conservation? We define conservation as a broad approach to preserving what is already there. It's a broad approach to preserving what is already there. Okay, it is also dedicated to restoring something to the natural state and maintaining equilibrium. So what people need to understand, the natural course of, say, a river or a creek, I'll use a creek or a stream, okay? It's to widen out and gain more sediment and eventually become a wetland and eventually dry up completely. So by dredging that stream and by revegetating the banks of that stream, you preserve that stream in the state that it is now. Now that's not the natural course of that stream, which would succumb to entropy, but that is conservation. Cultural heritage and the built environment of archaeological monuments, buildings. See, this is what's important to understand. Conservation of cultural heritage in the built environment of archaeological monuments, buildings of historic importance, and landscapes. This promotes cultural awareness and respect and preserves a built heritage for future generations to enjoy. Okay, anybody that's been to any historical locations throughout the United States, whether they're relatively modern or whether they're ancient, and like, for example, if you've ever been to the Pueblo areas in the Southwest, or whether you've been to the colonial areas in Bucks County, my very own part of Pennsylvania, you will notice that conservation of what we have historically is important to who we are as a people. Conservation of ecology, maintaining the delicate balance of an ecosystem or set of wildlife to ensure population numbers of threatened or endangered species are not put at risk. Resource conservation and active ways in which we seek to limit the use of resources and reduce. Now, it doesn't mean you have to limit the use of resources. Maybe we can acquire more of those resources, and I'm going to talk about that. Conservation ethics and philosophy, yada yada. I'm going to move on. People can follow these on their own. So, water generating systems. Anybody Probably people have heard about atmospheric water generation. Now, what that is that's technically like a dehumidifier. It sucks water out of the air to make it drinkable. So, atmospheric water harvesting for optimal water production uses existing refrigeration technology with advanced control systems to condense water vapor from the air to produce fresh, safe, and cost-effective drinking water with no harmful waste. Powered by grid generator or solar electricity, atmospheric water generation units can be operated easily and intuitively with a simplified user interface. Under typical atmospheric conditions, commercial units are able to produce up to several hundred liters of pure drinking water each day. Remember, do we really need to use less resources, or maybe we need to find a way to more to acquire these resources in a more economical, health-promoting, environmentally friendly way? Okay, commercial standalone and integrated water units. There are 2 WGS commercial atmospheric water generation product models. It can generate more than 200 gallons of pure potable water a day, an ambient air temperature of 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and 60% relative humidity. Its unique configuration enables air to be efficiently processed and removed simultaneously, minimizing overall unit size and moving parts. Both units can be installed at a new property or retrofitted for integration with an existing water chiller. They significantly reduce energy costs and allow for a notable reduction in capital costs, as well as enable commercial properties to more effectively meet stringent environmental regulations. Residential standalone units, okay, you can put them in houses. So you can see what I'm saying with this. About water generating systems. Washington, D.C. based water generating systems delivers optimal solutions, water sustainability, originally developed. Now again, I love DARPA. I freaking love DARPA. It was originally developed with the U.S. Department of Defense and private funding, yada yada, is a primary product developer and well-regarded contractor for the U.S. Navy and U.S. Department of Homeland Security. The company was awarded 4 grants at a total of $19.1 million by the U.S. Department. This is how you spend money to help the environment, right here. Not with gazillions of dollars being blown on honeybees. Right here. This is how you do it. Through the Department of Defense. Desalination for industrial use. Okay, so let's see here. This is an article, Desalination and Agricultural Lessons from Spain. So, desalination is essentially taking the salt out of water. It can be costly, but this is the thing. You have to understand, money really only works because we believe it works. Money is more or less imaginary, and we got to step out of, as Charles Manson would say, we have to step out of that money mind. Okay? The money mind is what's killing us. The money mind, thinking in terms of money, everything's money, 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 money. Money is imaginary. But you have to understand, desalination for industrial applications doesn't have to be desalinated as much as for human usage. Spanish desalination moving forward. Spain is not the only people that desalinate. Dubai, Israel, Saudi Arabia, a lot of countries desalinate for agricultural uses and things of that nature. That's another way to obtain fresh water. One of the things that really irks me is a lot of people like to get very angry at the communist Chinese. And I don't really understand why. I mean, there's a lot of things, the moral outrage and things like that. There's a lot of things I don't agree with in China, such as like the dog meat industry and the fact that they eat bats and all that crap. But in reality, when you really look at some of the stuff China's doing, it's remarkable, such as the way that they're terraforming Tibet and bringing greenhouses in Tibet. Some Tibetans are finally getting to eat fresh fruits and vegetables for the first time in their lives. But let's take a look at this. This is the From Deserts to Forest, our project in Burkina Faso. So this is how some people are, this is not the Communist Chinese, this is another company, but this is my playlist on reforestation and terraforming, and they're fighting desertification, meaning they're fighting deserts, they're fighting back the deserts, okay? So people might go, well, if you get rid of the deserts, what about the fragile ecosystem of the desert? Creatures that live in the desert are going to adapt to living in a forest. It's that simple. That's how evolution works, but let's move on with the video here. Do you understand what's going on here? Through human intervention, they are terraforming the desert. They are making the desert a forest. They're making it more habitable. They're making it more capable of supporting life. More capable of supporting agriculture. More habitable. So this is the use of Groasis, which is what the Chinese Communist government is using in Tibet to reforest the deserted regions of Tibet and make them more habitable, to prevent mudslides and all sorts of nasty stuff like that. So let's see how Groasis works. This is in Spain, of course, not Tibet, but
the Monegros Desert, where an extensive plantation was carried out by the Life Plus the Green Deserts project.
Ask yourself, why is this not happening in every arid region of the United States right now?
Here you see the degrading process of the biodegradable water box from 2012 until 2017. The Council of San Mateo de Gallego in Zaragoza used Groasis technology to provide water to this plantation. Thanks to the water that the water box supplies, the trees are growing healthy and strong on a terrain that used to be barren. These pine trees have been here since 2011, when they were just young saplings, and they have grown since then with the sole aid of the water box.
En 2012 empezamos a trabajar con Waterbox en un proyecto LIFE europeo para recuperar una zona desértica de nuestro término municipal. Un proyecto que nos sorprendió por los resultados, ya que sin tener que hacer un esfuerzo prácticamente para lo que es dotar de agua aquella zona, hemos conseguido resultados importantes. Es una zona muy complicada, no hay pluviometría a lo largo de todo el año, es prácticamente una zona extrema de estepa desértica, y los resultados del Waterbox, aportando 10 litros de agua, pues han sido espectaculares y nos permitieron que con solo una vez de llenado, durante lo que fue los 3 años y medio que duró el proyecto, pues no hubiera que hacer ningún tipo de mantenimiento más que pues los de limpieza de hierbas malas y ese tipo de situaciones. El proyecto terminó y bueno, seguimos manteniendo la zona porque se ha convertido en un pequeño oasis en medio del desierto, ha vuelto la vida animal a aquella zona.
Animal life has returned in the past. There weren't any animals, and now you can see rabbits, small birds, etc. Animal life has returned in the past. There weren't any animals, and now you can see rabbits, small birds, etc. Okay, so this is helping to improve biodiversity in this region of Spain. This is helping reforestation, terraforming, human intervention to basically intervene and promote the type of environment that humans want, which is a more biologically diverse region. It's working. It's working. Science is working. Technology is working.
Una zona donde no existían antes animales, pues ha vuelto a haber zona para la caza, conejos, pequeñas especies de pájaros. Entonces, bueno, el resultado ha sido importante para nosotros y de hecho, pues el ayuntamiento ahora en sus proyectos de recuperación paisajística de otras zonas está utilizando la tecnología Waterbox para poder continuar, puesto que nos permite que sin un esfuerzo de mantenimiento, sobre todo tema de riego, pues garantizar pervivencias de las plantas que utilizamos.
This was the plantation in 2012, when the plants had only been here for a year. The dryness of this terrain is clearly visible.
When you encourage vegetation, you encourage soil quality.
Today, what used to be bare land has transformed into a forest. It is incredible to see how vigorously these trees are growing. Most of these pine trees are over 2 meters tall. Other species were also planted in this area. Here we see a beautiful holm oak that has borne fruit, like many other specimens in this plantation. Having been impressed by the results, we head to other areas where different species were planted as a part of this project.
El Robinia pseudoacacia es muy interesante por la producción de biomasa. Son plantados en mayo de 2011. Entonces, este es el resultado después de un año.
En las fases iniciales del proyecto pues había pervivencias del 95%, con lo cual en la zona donde estamos, en las condiciones que se plantó, que fueron los meses de verano, porque no se hizo plantación en la primavera, que es lo que se suele hacer, ¿no? Aquí se utilizó y se puso a prueba el Waterbox, sembrando y plantándolo en el mes de julio, si no recuerdo mal. Entonces, bueno, los resultados han sido importantes porque lo que te garantiza la tecnología es que el agua que se dota al sistema Waterbox sirve para todo lo que es el ciclo vital de la planta, por lo menos en los 2-3 primeros años, y lo demostró pues eso, los diferentes testeos que hicieron los técnicos de la Universidad de Valladolid y los técnicos de aquí de Zaragoza. Si te sirve de referencia, un polígono industrial que está aquí a la entrada de los del pueblo, que tenía riego por goteo para las plantas, lo cerró porque no era rentable para ellos mantener el agua. En cambio aquí, con esta tecnología, pues lo que te hace es que te olvidas. Una vez que la planta es viable y ya luego entra en el ciclo vital de su propio crecimiento con el agua.
Okay, so you get the idea. I'm going to move on. So, how exactly do you turn a desert into a forest? Let's find out. That was a desert a couple years ago, but scientists found a way to grow trees there by using an irrigation system. A sewage treatment plant provided the water. So it might not be clean enough to irrigate crops, but it's clean enough to grow trees. By growing trees, it will make the area more habitable and more capable of sustaining crops in the long run. So due to the hot climate, they grow incredibly quickly. Arid regions are great, actually, believe it or not, for things like melons and things like that, because it decreases mold. There's less mold in these regions because of the lower humidity. It creates jobs. Everybody's worried about jobs. The best way to create jobs is by increasing natural resources. So you see this, they're creating lumber for building and for firewood. So you have to understand, they are creating natural resources from an area that was producing no natural resources. Can we grasp this? Can we grasp how applying technology, conservation technology, and terraforming actually works to create natural resources and allows us to gain access to natural resources that we may not have had access to before? So, Baruch Spinoza was a philosopher that was of Portuguese Sephardic Jewish descent. He was the primary influencer of Dr. William Luther Pierce's concept of cosmotheism. If you watch the video, I'm pretty sure it's probably still on BitChute. It used to be on YouTube years back before YouTube went batshit and started getting rid of everybody that they considered, not allowed. But Baruch Spinoza was the primary influence of cosmotheism, as Dr. Pierce stated. And it's in the video, the lecture that Dr. Pierce did in the 1960s, I believe it was, called Cosmotheism, the Wave of the Future. And I encourage people to watch that lecture. His region, of course, is Western philosophy, rationalism, Spinozism. Okay, so let's see here. These are his influences, yada, yada, yada. Biography, philosophy. So Spinoza's philosophy, I'm going to get way deep into this in a later video when I start dealing with pantheism. But first we're going to deal with the philosophical rationale for pantheism and the idea that there is a God. Okay, Spinoza's philosophy is considered part of the rationalist school of thought, which means substance attributes. There are the fundamental concepts with which Spinoza sets forth a vision of being illuminated by his awareness of God. They may seem strange at first, blah, blah, blah. Look, okay. Spinoza defines substance as that which is in itself and is conceived through itself, meaning that it can be understood without any reference to anything external. Being conceptually independent also means that the same thing is ontologically independent, depending on nothing else for its existence and being the cause of itself. A mode is something which cannot exist. Anybody that's familiar with ceremonial magic and the invocation of the Bornless One will see this hinted at here. A mode is something which cannot exist independently, but rather must do so as part of something else on which it depends. Modes can be further divided into finite and infinite ones, with the latter being evident in every finite mode. Okay, Spinoza defined God as a substance consisting of infinite attributes, each of which expresses eternal and infinite essence, and since no cause or reason can prevent such being from existing, it therefore must exist. This is a form of ontological argument which is claimed to prove the existence of God, but Spinoza went further in stating that it showed that only God exists. Accordingly, he stated that whatever is in God, and nothing could exist or be conceived without God. You'll see hints to the Ptolemaic concepts. This means that God is identical with the universe, an idea which is encapsulated in the phrase Deus sive natura, God or nature. Okay, which has been interpreted by some as atheism or pantheism. It is pantheism. God can be known either through the attribute or of extension or attribute of thought, Thought and extension represent giving complete accounts of the world in mental or physical terms. To this end, he says that the mind and the body are one and the same. Keep that in mind. The mind and the body are one and the same. This is going to come in very important when I start covering the 8 laws of health, Ellen G. White, and biologic living, John Harvey Kellogg's biologic living, which is conceived now under the attribute of thought, now under the attribute of extension. Now, that's going to be all for this video. I'm going to get much more deep into pantheism with my next video or videos.